Number 3. The McClures. On Christmas morning 1956, Lewis Head, the minister at Coral Gables Methodist Church in Coral Gables, Florida, received a disturbing phone call. It was one of his parishioners, 52-year-old Leslie McClure. Leslie lived in Miami with his wife, 41-year-old Ruth McClure, who was pregnant, and their 2 children, 22-month-old Anna and 7-month-old Leslie II. The family ran a boarding house for children in their apartment. McClure told Head that he had murdered his family, and after he hung up, he was going to shoot himself. He asked Head to call the police for him. Head called the police, and officers rushed the apartment. Outside the building, in a sandbox, they saw a small pink Christmas tree with ornaments that had been dumped there. They broke into the family's apartment and found Leslie sitting in the kitchen taking headache medication. He told the police, "I guess I spoke to the minister too long. I didn't get a chance to kill myself." The police looked in one of the bedrooms and found 3 dead bodies. 22-month-old Anna was on a cot on one side of the room. On the other side of the room was a playpen which had the body of 7-month-old Leslie II in it. On the floor between the 2 children was the dead body of 41-year-old Ruth. They had all been shot twice with a .22 caliber pistol. He then gave the police a note that reads, "The Lord gives and He takes away. We talked things over and weighed the net results. Since we find no other means of staying together, the decision was this. Please give my father the murder weapon with my thanks. The gun is registered in Miami." He then signed his name. Leslie confessed to the murders. He said he shot his son first, then his daughter, and finally his wife. He said that he prayed before killing his wife. Leslie had an odd story as to what led up to the murders. He said he had been diagnosed with cancer. After he became sick, they turned their apartment into a boarding house for children. They had 4 kids living with them, but they were all away for Christmas. He explained that the family was $800 in debt and they had no way to pay it. Accounting for inflation, that is about $9,000 in 2023. He also said that they were going to be evicted from their apartment in 2 weeks for non-payment of rent. He and Ruth talked about it and decided it would be best for all of them to die. He told the police that not killing himself was the first time he let his wife down. After he shot his family, he called his father, who lived in Swissvale, Pennsylvania. He then called the minister at his church, who called the police. Leslie McClure was arrested for the murder of his family. After the murders, family members of the couple said that they received letters Ruth wrote before she died that indicated that she and Leslie had made a suicide pact. Leslie was ordered to undergo a psychiatric examination to see if he was mentally fit to stand trial. It was determined that he was sane, so he was scheduled to go to trial in July 1957. The day before the trial, Leslie was interviewed by a reporter. He claimed that he didn't remember killing his family or confessing. He said that on that Christmas morning he was on a sedative, bromine-potassium. He said that there was a blank spot in his mind for the time of the murders. However, he didn't regret killing his family and said he would do it again. He said that after he got sick, he couldn't find work and support his family. He believed that his children would have been taken from them and placed in a foster home. He thought it was better for them to be with Jesus. In another interview, Leslie said he wanted to be executed so he could be with his family. Leslie McClure's trial started on July 22, 1957. The prosecution honored his request by asking for the death penalty if he were to be found guilty. Leslie pleaded not guilty and not guilty by reason of insanity. The prosecution said that Leslie and Ruth had entered into a suicide pact, but Leslie didn't have the courage to follow through with his part. The trial lasted 4 days, then the jury deliberated for 4 hours and 20 minutes. Leslie McClure was found guilty of 3 counts of first-degree murder. He was spared the death penalty. Instead, he was given 3 life sentences that were to run concurrently. This would make him eligible for parole in just 7 years. So he had been eligible for parole in 1964 when he was 59. He was sent to the Florida State Prison in Rayford, Florida to serve his sentence. He appealed his conviction in 1958, but his appeal was denied. After that, it's not known what happened to Leslie McClures. Number 2. The Oilers. In the winter of 1954, the Oiler family lived in Pasadena, California. 39-year-old Harold and his 39-year-old wife, Betty, had 3 children, 12-year-old Randolph, 9-year-old Janet, and 7-year-old Martha. Martha had a physical disability. Harold owned a rug business with his father, and Betty was a Sunday school teacher. Many people thought that Harold was odd. He had recently sent letters to friends and family stating that he was selecting 100 Christian friends to form a non-sectarian study movement. He also had a criminal record. In 1938, he was convicted of indecent exposure, and in 1953, he was convicted on peeping Tom charges. He didn't serve any jail time for his convictions. On December 18, 1954, the family hosted a Christmas party. The family, along with friends and family, gathered around the piano and organ in the living room and sang Christmas carols while Betty played the instruments. Then they went out and sang to neighbors. Afterward, the family returned home, which was decorated for Christmas. That night, a neighbor girl, 7-year-old Bronwyn Rayburn, was sleeping over. She went to bed in Martha's room with Martha and Janet. The next morning, Bronwyn awoke on the side porch. She tried to enter the house, but found it locked. There was a note on the door, but she couldn't read it. So she went outside and started playing in the sandbox. Her father, Robert Rayburn, who was president of a Bible college, came over and found her in the sandbox. He went to the porch and found the note. It read, "Bronwyn, go home. Do not go in the house. Tell your daddy to call the police." Robert was shocked by the note. He followed the instructions and called the police. The first officer to arrive at the family's home found a disturbing scene. It looked like a peaceful home at Christmas time, with decorations and presents piled under the tree. But in the bedrooms, the officer found nightmarish gore. 39-year-old Betty was in the master bedroom, 12-year-old Randolph was in his room, and 9-year-old Janet and 7-year-old Martha were in Martha's room. Blankets were over their heads. The officer removed the blankets and discovered that they had all been hacked in the face and head with a hatchet. The officer smelled gas fumes. It was coming from the bathroom. The bathroom door was missing its doorknobs. The officer broke the door down, and inside was 39-year-old Harold, who was unconscious. Beside him was a bloody Boy Scout hatchet. There was also photos of the family taped to the walls. The room was full of gas and made the officer feel faint. The paramedics had to wait for the room to air out a little bit before going inside. Harold was taken to the hospital. He made a full recovery. In the house, the police found several notes written by Harold in which he said he was having serious financial problems. He wrote, "Only God understands. Only God can forgive." He also wrote, "Sell out everything to pay debts." Harold was interviewed by the police. He told them he bought the Boy Scout hatchet he used to kill his family about a year earlier. Ever since he bought it, he had thought about killing his family. That night, he picked up Bronwyn and carried her to the porch. He also let the family's dog into the backyard. He then hacked his family to death. He went into the bathroom and removed the doorknob. He dismantled the heater so it would spew gas into the bathroom. There was a chain around the toilet with a padlock, and it appeared that Harold planned to chain himself to the toilet, but didn't. Also, he stopped the gas by putting a pencil into the gas jet. In the notes found in the house, Harold gave the reason of financial difficulties for the massacre. At the time, Harold's drug business was failing. He told a psychiatrist that he was angry that his wife was spending beyond their means. He had thought about killing himself, but he did not think his family could live without his support. He also thought they would be embarrassed if his criminal record was made public. On February 3, 1955, nearly a month and a half after murdering his wife and 3 young children with a hatchet, 39-year-old Harold Oilers pleaded guilty to 4 counts of first-degree murder. On February 14, 1955, he was sentenced to death. He was sent to death row at San Quentin Prison. On March 14, 1955, 10 days after his 40th birthday, and nearly 3 months after he slaughtered his family, Harold Oilers was found dead in his cell. He had hanged himself with 3 towels. Number 1. The Wholavers. Middletown in Dauphin County, Pennsylvania has a population of less than 10,000 people. In December 2002, 43-year-old Jean Wholavers lived in the town with her 2 daughters, 20-year-old Victoria and 15-year-old Elizabeth, and her 9-month-old granddaughter, Madison. Madison was Victoria's daughter. Victoria and the father of the baby, Francisco Ramos, were separated. Jean and the father of her daughters, Ernest Wholavers, had split up that summer after 20 years of marriage. The Wholavers family had a Christmas tradition. They would have dinner at Jean's parents' home in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, which is about 145 miles from Middletown. They would spend the night there and then open presents on Christmas morning. On Christmas Eve 2002, Jean and her daughters didn't show up for dinner. Her mother was obviously very concerned and called the police to see if there had been any accidents on their route. The next morning, she still had not heard from her daughter or grandchildren, so she asked the police to do a welfare check. The police went to the house and found a broken window pane on the door to the garage. They got inside the house and they found the dead bodies of 43-year-old Jean, 20-year-old Victoria, and 15-year-old Elizabeth. They all had been shot once in the head with a .22 caliber gun. 9-month-old Madison was alive and she was clinging to her mother's dead body. The police believe that the 3 women were killed sometime on the night of December 23rd or the morning of December 24th. So Madison had been alone and unattended to for at least 24 hours. The police had 2 main suspects, Victoria's ex-boyfriend, Francisco Ramos, and Ernest Wholavers, the father of Victoria and Elizabeth, and Jean's estranged husband. Victoria and Ramos had a volatile relationship. While living together, the police had been called to their home several times. Ramos had also doubted that he was Madison's father. The police questioned him, and he said he had an alibi for the time of the murders, so he was cleared as a suspect. 43-year-old Ernest and his wife had been separated since the summer. There was an incredibly dark reason why the couple split up. Victoria and Elizabeth had accused him of sexually abusing them for years. In July 2002, he had been arrested on charges of sexual abuse. Ernest was released on a $100,000 bail. He was ordered to stay away from his family and their home. He moved in with his parents and 28-year-old brother, Scott Wholavers, in Cambria County, Pennsylvania, which is over 150 miles from Middletown. At the time of the murders, the trial for the sexual abuse was just a month away. Also, Jean and Ernest had been going through the divorce process, and the police learned that things weren't going well for Ernest, and he wasn't happy about it. The police thought that Ernest had the best motive for the murders. The only evidence against him regarding the sexual abuse charges were going to be Victoria and Elizabeth's testimony. If they could not testify, there would be no case against him. Also, killing his wife would get rid of the problems associated with the divorce. He'd also inherit the estate and collect money from Jean's life insurance policy. The police questioned Ernest's family. His uncle said that on the night of the murders, Ernest and his brother Scott were not home. The police questioned Scott, and he told them that night they were looking for deer and coyotes in Cambria County. However, after further interrogation, Scott had a new story for the detectives. He said that Ernest was bitter over the divorce and they had wanted to shoot Jean. On the night of December 23rd, they were drinking at a bar in Cambria County. Then Ernest asked him to drive him to his family's home because he wanted to get his dog. They arrived in Middletown around 4 a.m. on Christmas Eve. Scott said he parked his truck about a block from the family's home. Ernest left while wearing 2 pairs of gloves, dark clothes, and a hunting mask. He returned about 10 minutes later, and his mood was noticeably different. He seemed agitated, and he was nervous. He told his brother to drive, and as they drove away, he changed his clothes. Ernest made him stop near a wooded area in Clearfield County. Ernest got out of the vehicle with a pistol, a shotgun, and the clothes he had changed out of. When he returned to the vehicle, he no longer had the items. Scott took the police to the wooded area where Ernest dumped the guns and the clothing. The police found a shotgun, some burned clothing, and a .22 caliber pistol. The pistol was tested for ballistics. An expert said it could have been the murder weapon, but couldn't say for sure because the gun had degraded due to the elements. The police found surveillance footage from a convenience store between Cambria County and Middletown. It recorded the men in their vehicle. On January 2, 2003, Ernest's bail was revoked because the police thought he might be a flight risk. The next day, his brother was arrested and charged with being an accomplice in the murders. On January 15, 2003, Ernest was charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder. In jail, Ernest talked to a fellow inmate and gave him a bizarre story. He said that he did go to the home of his wife and daughters on the night of the murders. He was looking in the windows and he saw his wife on the kitchen floor, so he broke into the house. He found her bleeding to death. He didn't help her, he just kissed her hand. He then went upstairs and found the dead bodies of his daughters. He also found a .22 caliber gun on the floor. He picked up the gun and took it with him. He disposed of the gun and burned his clothes because he didn't want to be falsely accused of their murders. He also knew who committed the murders. It was Francisco Ramos, Victoria's ex-boyfriend and Madison's father. Ernest said that he wanted to get justice and thought the only way he could do it was to hire a hitman to kill Ramos. He wanted to make it look like a suicide and then have a suicide note where he confessed the murders. The inmate told the police what Ernest had told him. They told the inmate to tell Ernest that he would connect him with a hitman, but would really be an undercover agent with the DEA. The inmate did that and connected him with an undercover agent. Ernest repeated his story and his request to the agent, who recorded the conversations about the hit job. Ernest was then charged with solicitation of murder. In August 2004, Ernest Wholavers went to trial for the murders of his estranged wife and his daughters, solicitation of murder, endangering Madison's life, and 10 charges of sexually assaulting his daughters. The star witness was Scott Wholavers, who made a plea deal. He would plead guilty to 3 counts of third-degree murder for a sentence of 12.5 years to 25 years in prison in exchange for his testimony. The only evidence for the charges of sexually abusing his daughters were their testimonies from the preliminary trial, which were read aloud in court. The defense said Ernest did not molest his daughters, therefore he had no motive to kill his family. He wanted to hire a hitman because he was a bereaved father and husband who wanted revenge. The trial lasted a week, and then the jury deliberated for 2 hours. The jury found Ernest Wholavers guilty of all charges related to the murders, but acquitted him of all sexual assault charges. The next day, the jury sentenced him to death. 49-year-old Scott Wholavers was released on parole in 2015 after serving 13 years. Ernest Wholavers was scheduled to be executed on March 1, 2011, but he was given a stay of execution. In 2015, executions in Pennsylvania were halted. At the time of this video, Pennsylvania lawmakers are trying to abolish the death penalty, so it seems unlikely that Ernest will be executed. 63-year-old Ernest Wholavers is incarcerated at the State Correctional Institution Phoenix in Collegeville, Pennsylvania. Thank you so much for watching today's video. Please don't forget to check out our new channel, Paranormally Listed. There's a link on the screen now, and there's a link in the description box below this video. Well, that's all for today. Thanks again for watching.